If you're frustrated after years of trying to fix things like social anxiety, procrastination, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, phobias, insomnia, and so much more, reading all the books, attending the seminars, following expert advice, only to find temporary relief, then you're not alone. Many of my clients have spent 5, 10, or even 20 years seeking solutions, yet the core issue remained unchanged. I'm Dr. Paul Fitzgerald, and for over 25 years, I've worked with more than 6,000 people to help them resolve their hidden cause, trauma-induced internalized shame. This deeper issue is what impacts the quality of your life, your relationships, and your spirituality, often sabotaging them. In this video, I'll explain why it's crucial to stop focusing on the symptoms and start addressing the real problem. While I'm no longer offering my seminars, I've developed an improved version of Rapid Transformation that's now available for individuals online in the comfort of your own home as a way of illustrating the importance of distinguishing between symptoms and core problems. I often ask, what if you had a gallstone and you had no pain? That would be incredibly dangerous. You could die. Or what if you had a gallstone and you had a little pain, enough pain that you wanted to dull the pain? You took medication or you did other things to dull the pain, but the gallstone was still there. You could die. The best thing that could happen would be that you have enough pain as a symptom to get the medical help you need to treat the real problem. Misidentifying a symptom for the real problem actually delays healing. So it's important to begin by identifying what I mean by trauma. The way I use the term trauma is any psychologically emotional energy at any age that still triggers your unconscious to predict a risk to your safety and defenses that negatively impacts your quality of life today. Emotional injuries can include the inappropriate overt action of another person toward you, even at any age. It's amazing how children know that some of the overt actions they experience by the hands of adults are not right, are not healthy. Secondly, the absence of an empathic, caring action that you wanted or you needed can be a mini trauma, a micro trauma, if you want to call it that, but a trauma that's embedded in our body neurological system. And third, just witnessing inappropriate actions or lack of caring toward another person. We're pretty smart people, pretty smart kids, in fact. We can watch and see what happens to other people and learn from that, and it can begin to affect our neurological system. Now, the symptoms of trauma are across the board. There's all kinds of ways. Depression, feeling like we're ashamed, numbing, phobic panic attacks, hypervigilance, perfectionism. There's all kinds of symptoms, and they can look very distinct and different. They often are treated as distinct and different. What I'm saying is that unless you deal with the core issue, the trauma-induced internalized shame, you're just dealing with the symptoms, the outward signs, rather than the core issue. So let me introduce a term here. It's a term called neuroception. It's important to understand that our neurological system, our nerves, our unconscious system, can shift our emotional state from normal, calm, to fight, flight, or to freeze, collapse, or even to fawn. Fawn might be a new term for you. Fawn is when we just go along and get along. We can look like things are just rolling off our back. We're not reacting negatively. We're not fighting. We're not flying. We're not freezing, but we're in that middle state where we're just posing. So our neurological system can shift our emotional state to fight, flight, freeze, collapse, or fawn when it imagines a safety risk triggered by a look, a sight, a sound, a smell, taste, hearing other people who are physically present, or we imagine is present. Our imagination is that powerful. After experiencing the emotional shift, then we create a story for it to make sense and justify how and why and who caused it. So many people want to take responsibility to control their emotions. What I'm saying is our emotional response can precede our conscious awareness. When we ask ourselves, just control your emotions. The way we do that is just shut off all our emotions. Very unhealthy approach to dealing with not only symptoms, but also the core issue. Because fawn might be a new term to you, I want to share this. Fawning can look like we're just cool as a cucumber. We're invincible, like it just doesn't matter to us. But most of the time, we're just emotionally numb. In dysfunctional family settings, there are 3 rules that keep us in dysfunction, and they stay with us, unfortunately, as adults. We learn them. Don't talk is one of them. Don't talk about the things nobody wants to talk about. The second is don't feel. Don't feel what you feel because it's a bad feeling. It's not a good feeling. How dare you feel like that? How could you possibly feel like that? After all we've done for you, how could you possibly feel that? God doesn't like you to feel that way. I don't like you to feel that way. Good boys don't feel that way. Good girls don't feel that way. And we've already learned we can't talk about it. And we also learned we can't trust. And so we just shut down our feelings. We stay stuck, often at very young ages. Emotionally, we stay stuck. Too often, our approach to solving our problem is a whack-a-mole approach. We whack down procrastination, and then perfectionism comes up. We whack down perfectionism, and social anxiety comes up. We whack down one symptom, we find ourselves with other symptoms. And often, over time, the same symptom comes back because we're dealing with the symptoms, not with the actual problem. If you think of an iceberg, and the symptoms would be what's above the line, what we can see. But hidden below the surface, down deep in our unconscious, is where the trauma-induced, internalized shame problem really lies. And until and unless we deal with that problem, and it really is almost impossible to fix it, to figure it out, to come to an answer of why, because it's at a very unconscious level, not conscious. And many of us have experienced trauma over time. Many times it's micro traumas, little traumas, but they build up. We're hardly through one and not really processed, and we have another one and then another one. I grew up with a mother who had a pressure cooker, and we loved that because she could make a lot of great meals in that and do a lot of canning. I helped her. She always reminded me, she said, Paul, make sure the valve on the top isn't stuck. Because if the valve on the top is stuck, when the pressure builds up, it's going to explode. And many of us have felt pressure. And it's like one more thing happens, I'm going to just explode. And unfortunately, we do. And then we have to clean up the mess. But the explosion is a symptom telling us something has not been taken care of. Something in our environment has not been taken care of properly. Sometimes we blow up at work, blow up in social settings. I'm sure it's easier to see in other people than ourselves. People who are normally easy to get along with, going along fine. And all of a sudden, they're throwing a temper tantrum like they're a 5 or a 10-year-old kid, just angry at life and so out of character. And sometimes they will even say to us, I don't know what came over me. That isn't me. It sure looked like you. And there's what they're telling us the truth. because their neurological system perceived a lack of safety and they went to a fight flight. And then they have to try to find a story as to who caused it, who to blame it on. Unfortunately, sometimes it's a blow up with a spouse, partner. Sometimes it's a blow up with a child. And even when it's a blow up with another partner or another adult, our children are listening. Our children are hearing. Our children are finding a way to expect a prediction. If I do X, I'm going to get in trouble Y, and I won't be okay. So we begin to shut down. We begin to believe that is a problem. If I don't do it perfectly enough, if I don't get the right grades, if I don't control my anger. And so children begin to accommodate the symptoms, but really it's creating a core problem at an unconscious level. Sometimes we don't explode. Unfortunately, sometimes people implode. That is, we don't rage and put holes in walls. We wind up putting holes in our own heart. We just implode, become depressed. We lose perspective. Things seem hopeless. We're stuck. We try to read positive materials. We do affirmations. We get some antidepressants. The challenge is that that's dealing with the symptom, not really the core issue. And then many of us have a core inner critic, an inner critic who's always talking down to us, as if it's the adult and we're the child, as if we haven't grown up. When you think about the inner critic, imagine that rather than being an inner critic, it's an inner worrier or an inner protector, still worried for you that you're not going to be able to handle some situation, that you're not going to be okay. Now, in the big scale of things, it's not bad to have somebody worrying for you as long as they don't pressure you, as long as they don't try to take over your life. Sometimes our inner critic shows up when it seems to be a protector that's worried that we, the adult we are today, is not going to show up. And we're going to be crushed and hurt like we were at some earlier previous time in our life. So we can be an adult, 40, 50, 60 years old, and yet have within us a protector trying to protect that child. And so we react externally as if we're still that child. And sometimes we are thinking with the cognitive skills that we had at that day rather than the day to day. That's a symptom. It's a warning. Something inside is not the way it should be. I'm suggesting that deeper problem is at the level of the unconscious. One of our earliest defenses is to try to figure things out. When something happens, we want to know why. As a child, we begin to ask why. And we begin to trust our ability to understand why in order to protect ourselves. There's an unconscious prediction that if I don't figure it out, something bad could happen. That represents probably some level of trauma-induced internalized shame, because the opposite would be something I don't want to happen could happen and I would be okay anyway. Trying to figure it out is so natural. I use this illustration of a beach ball to share why it's hard to use our conscious logical mind in order to figure it out. The problem lies in our unconscious. The symptoms become very conscious to us. In fact, our conscious mind can become very preoccupied and overanalyzing the symptoms, trying to figure it out. Our unconscious is like a supercomputer that holds all of the information from our past, more information than we can even access. It's not unusual for people to say, there are whole years or decades of my childhood that I can't even remember. Probably that's because it was painful at some level or confusing at some level. There was something there that was difficult to process as a child that you were then, and your unconscious mind protected you from it. It may come up at a later date, not to haunt you, not to disturb you, not to punish you, but rather to provide an opportunity for healing. The beach ball represents the unconscious mind. The silver circle on top is a dime that represents the size of your conscious mind in comparison to the unconscious mind. Our conscious mind is quite limited. We can only hold about 7 to 9 clusters of information any one time. I'm sure, like me, you've been concentrating on something and you got distracted. Somebody talked to you, the phone rang, something happened. And when you got back to what you were doing, that you were concentrating on so much, you begin to ask, now, where was I? And what was I doing? And how was I thinking? You've already set that aside in order to take in the other information. The unconscious mind is not like that. The unconscious mind can run basically all of our biological systems of breathing, our heartbeat, our digestive system, and it's all outside our conscious awareness. The square in the middle, the black square, some people refer to it as a critical faculty. That is a screen that processes information from the outside and allows some to go deep inside. And it sometimes allows information from inside to come to the outside. So we have a memory, we have a recollection of some sort, or sometimes we have a trigger. Using the conscious mind to try to solve an unconscious problem really isn't very effective. In fact, I compare it to using a Game Boy, a handheld Game Boy, to solve a problem that we use a supercomputer for. It's really not very effective. But we begin to believe that if we could just solve it logically. But our emotions, our triggers, our heart wounds, our trauma-induced internalized shame lies deep in our unconscious, and so it takes a different approach to deal with that. So it's fair to ask, Dr. Paul, what do you do differently? First of all, I offer a complimentary strategy session online to really hear you and how you want to define your goals. They're not my goals. I have no expectations for anybody. They're your goals. And what are the obstacles in the way of overcoming those goals? Across the years, I've talked to people about having some success of transformation, and they want to list 15 other things that they want to work on. Those are symptoms, okay? If they're in the way of what you want to create, let's work on them. If they're not in the way, then don't use them as a way to delay making the hard choices to create what you want. If you choose to work with me, we'll schedule a 2-hour session online to transform the problem at its root cause. Now, why 2 hours? A lot of sessions, normal sessions, about the first 10 minutes, it's about greeting and pleasantries. The last maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes of a 45 or 50-minute session is about what's going to happen between sessions and scheduling and so forth. So there's about 20 minutes of real talk time in the middle. And that way you got to have a 3 or 4 or 5 sessions to get an hour and a half of work. I figure people want to get over as quickly as possible, solve the problem, and so we'll schedule a 2-hour session. And for many people, that 2-hour session takes care of the majority of the problem. If it doesn't, then we can meet some additional sessions because we want to solve the problem. All your sessions are uniquely designed around your needs and your situation to get the fastest result possible. You will experience additional transformations that may at first look like they're not totally related to the initial core issue, but they all seem to be tied together. And you'll do that without additional homework, and you can do it without additional long hours listening to audios, and you can just go on with your life. My goal is to help you remove and delete emotional triggers that hijack your success. Rather than giving you more coping skills or logical suggestions that leave the triggers in place and risk relapse back into the problem. For most of my life, until 5 years ago, I began to learn about it, all the helping professions assumed that old trauma responses that were learned at an earlier age are hardwired in our brain. When it's triggered, again, a neurological system is triggered outside our conscious awareness, it wins. And so we add more coping skills. And then we added some competitive skills. So let's add meditation, prayer, affirmations. Let's add cognitive behavioral thinking, or get our thinking straight. If we just get our logic straight, our left brain straight, then we could compete with this emotional side over here. However, it left it intact. Now we know this is a process to delete and remove old learned trauma responses without the risk of relapse. That's a huge deal. It's no longer dealing with the symptom. It's about dealing with the root cause. And so if you're at a threshold, if you believe something needs to change, and what is to change now? And it's me, and you're ready to do that, then I offer a free strategy session. You can sign up at pauldfitzgerald.com. Let's look at it. Let's decide how we can move forward, and let's transform the life that you have into the life that you really want to create.